the people who will be speaking tonight. We have our Chief Judge, Ken Martin, who will be joining us a little later. I don't think he's here just yet. John Hotchner and Andrew Kelly. And each one of these people are going to start out by telling us a little bit about themselves, who they are, where they're from, what and their background as a judge. And after we've heard from all three, then each of them will give a short presentation on various things related to judging of exhibits. So, John, can you start out?
John, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Um,
I wonder, I see John on the list. Maybe he's on here twice.
Okay. Well, seeing John isn't available to tell a little bit about himself, Andrew, can you?
Oh wait, John is unmuted now, so John, maybe you can chime in.
John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you collect, your background as a judge?
Marianne, maybe you should jump to Andrew, and I'll see if I can get a hold of John through email here.
Okay. Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sure thing. I'll jump in while John's
Can you
getting
jump in?
connected.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Andrew Kelly. Nice to join all of you. Thank you for having me. Uh, I think I guess I'm a relatively new judge. I think I've been judging for 4 or 5 years now, although I've been extremely active during that time. Been lucky to look at lots of great exhibits, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing some more at Milcopex. I'm the editor of the United States Specialist, and as you might guess from that, my collecting interest focus primarily on 20th century United States issues, although I have a lot of other sort of idiosyncratic issue interest elsewhere, and kind of split my time half and half between sort of traditional you know, stamp collecting and then postal history collecting. I'm also an active exhibitor. My exhibit of the lithographed Washington Franklin heads has won a number of grand awards, large gold internationally, and been fortunate that that's done well. I'm starting to work on some new stuff now that I've shown that a number of times. I think that's a reasonably good intro. Oh, I live in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, is John Hotchner available at this? And for those who are not aware, Ken Martin is expected to be here, but Ken has had another program presentation rather that he is giving, and he's cutting it really close on time. He expects to be here about 7:15, 8:15 your time.
Mary, if you like, it's slightly out of order, but I don't mind, or Marianne, I don't mind sort of giving my portion of the presentation now while John is uh, is reconnecting.
While we try to find people. Okay. Um,
Sure.
you were going to address the rarity, condition, and presentation part, as I recall.
Yep, that's correct. That's correct. We split
So
up the scoring
you're willing to go
criteria.
ahead, we'd appreciate that.
Sure. Well, as Marianne said, I'm here to talk about rarity, uh, condition, and presentation. Uh, fairly significant. Oh, those two, rarity and condition account for 30% of an exhibit's score. And I think it's at a place where, um, oftentimes exhibitors have opportunities to sort of improve their score by just changing how they present their material a bit. So I'm excited to talk about those. Let's start with rarity. Rarity is 20 points, as folks are probably aware. And rarity in this context focuses on the sort of absolute number of the stamps or postal history items or whatever proofs that exist. And it's important to distinguish rarity in this context from scarcity or cost. For example, the inverted Jenny is an incredibly expensive stamp, but it's not really a rare stamp, right? There are 98 of them, and if one had the sufficient balance in their philatelic bank account, you could get one in a couple of days if you need to. Certainly, items in most exhibits that are much less common than that, and that kind of less commonality is what we're talking about here. To get your high rarity points, an exhibit needs to do two things. First, make sure that you include the rare items that are necessary to achieve the intent or the purpose of the exhibit. That doesn't mean you have to have all the possible rarities or that your exhibit will never score well if there's some that you don't have. I can think of at least one Champion of Champions winning exhibit that's missing a major rarity, but it's an outstanding exhibit anyway, and so it doesn't matter. You need enough rare stuff to tell your story and convey to the judges and the viewer that you didn't shirk the hard stuff, right? You got the stuff that's going to be hard to track down, whether or not it's expensive. The second thing that you need to do to maximize
Well,
rarity
it's
points,
apt to speak.
Mm, yeah,
John, hello.
there you go.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey, John.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. All right. I'm on my iPhone. Go ahead and we'll adapt.
sure. I was
I'm not
just about
sure I
halfway
can.
through rarity.
Okay.
Okay, we'll finish up and then I'll hand the mic over to you. Um, so so anyway, so we talked about two things that an exhibit should do to get the best possible rarity score. The first one is just have enough rare stuff to carry the story, carry the purpose. The second one, and one where I think exhibitors struggle a little bit sometimes, is clearly identifying and properly describing and quantifying the rarity of their rare items. And that can go wrong in a couple of ways. We do oftentimes see exhibits that don't describe the rarity at all, or just say it's rare without any commentary. The better plan is to let the judges know why you think something is rare and important, right? Ideally, you could say that there was a published census that quantified the number of the items that are extant. If that's not possible, you might describe rarity based on your knowledge of the subject matter, a working census, the number of those items that have been on market in a certain period of time, and so on. And if you're going to do that, you can kind of tell the judges what you're up to in the synopsis. Let them know why you're credible when you're talking about why something's rare. Uh, you want to avoid things like just saying it's rare with no explanation. Uh, Similarly, we see exhibitors sometimes who say that an item is possibly unique. That's a terrible idea. It makes it sound like you, as the expert in the area, don't know whether it's unique or not. You ought to either say that it's unique, or if you're sure there are fewer than two, then say that. We don't talk about items as being scarce. It's not really a rarity term. Uh, we do sometimes see folks who have contrived rarity. I mean, we can all find something in our cover that just by happens, or excuse me, in our collection that by happenstance is unique, right? A cover sent on a particular day from one particular town to another particular town. That's not really the kind of rarity that we're after, right? We want sort of non-contrived or a rarity that you would meet that common sense of that if you're talking to philatelic friends. I also sometimes see exhibitors that mark too many or too few items as rare. I think a handful per frame is generally ideal. That might vary if you have a an exhibit with just some particularly spectacular stuff. Maybe you have marked more than that, but you don't want to cry wolf. You don't want to mark too many things or too few things as the kind of highlights or gems of your exhibit. And the last thing that exhibitors often do is kind of overcomplicating how they show rarity. We see exhibits occasionally that use a system of different colored mats to indicate different levels of rarity or different markings next to the stamps or whatever. In my experience, and I think in the experience of a lot of judges, that just causes confusion. Just pick a simple system to mark the stuff that you think is really important and folks ought to look at, and stick to that. That's generally much more effective than a complicated system where you need a key to understand what's what. So that's rarity. Let's turn to sort of its cousin, which is condition. I think condition is one of the easier scoring criteria to understand. It's 10 points. Focuses on the appearance of the items in your exhibit. Philatelic items, ephemera, etc. It includes the obvious things you think of, where the stamps are or covers are soiled or toned, how well stamps are centered, uh, that type of thing. Condition also includes some less obvious stuff. For example, in a postal history exhibit, which I know we're talking about tonight, the clarity and completeness of the markings is a condition factor. Obviously, a clear strike of a marking is preferable to a smudge strike or an indistinct strike. Internationally, condition encompasses the question of whether a cover is properly franked or not. In the US, we don't treat that as part of condition. We actually treat it elsewhere as part of knowledge, but mention that for completeness, if folks are thinking about international exhibiting. And judges look at a condition, I think, in two ways. One, it's very common to sort of take a step back and assess the gestalt of the exhibit as a whole, right? Sort of what's your impression from a few feet away. And judges sometimes nitpick by looking for covers that are or individual items that are in poor condition. Uh, Obviously, expectations for condition are going to vary by subject matter. For example, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I collect a lot of early 20th century material, including a lot of World War I covers. The paper during that era was generally awful. It turns brown, it's brittle. The World War I covers are often worse for wear, having traveled around Europe and then back to the US. And so a judge's condition, hopeful, or excuse me, a judge's expectation, hopefully, for that material is going to be a little different than if it was an exhibit of modern first day covers, where the material is available in absolutely pristine shape. And the same principle applies to other collecting areas. If there's something about your exhibit where there's a sort of non-obvious circumstance that explains why the material is not absolutely pristine, you want to tell the judges that in your synopsis, right? Like a story like my story about the acidic paper in early 20th century US. There's other similar stories. Make sure the judges know about that. Other things you can do to help your condition score. I find that for covers, it is often very helpful to mat the covers on a backing paper. I use a light gray paper. Sometimes people use tan. There's lots of other choices, but it gives a little border around the cover. And the nice thing about that is when a judge is standing there looking at your exhibit, maybe doing that assessment from a few steps back, the judge's eye doesn't catch on sort of any imperfections in the edges of the cover. Sort of you subconsciously, you see the nice even rectangle from the hopefully acid-free paper that you're using as a sort of a mat for the covers. And I found that can help. In my own experience, I think my condition scores have gone up a little bit since I've started using mats like that. It's a little bit of work to cut them. You got to be careful you don't damage the covers while you're doing it. But it's an easy way to make your material more attractive and sort of minimize people's perceptions of the faults. It's also acceptable, particularly for expensive items or rare items, to have the item repaired or cleaned by a paper conservator. There are a number of folks who do that in the philatelic world, and their work is remarkable. Just be sure that if you do that, it's fine to do that, but be sure that if you do that, you identify those items in the item description. You don't want to have something repaired or cleaned or altered in some fashion and not tell the judges about that. Just put it at the end of your cover or your stamp description. And that leads us to the last of the three topics that I was going to chat about, which is presentation. Your presentation is only worth 5 points. But I think that can understate the impact, right? If you're if your presentation is such that it's really distracting, it's going to be hard for the judges to digest the material that you're presenting, digest the information, you read the text you're presenting. And so oftentimes exhibits that have poor presentation sort of, I think, see a broader knock-on effect in the other categories, including some of the ones that John is going to chat about. But focusing on that category itself, right? Presentation is simple. It focuses on the overall visual appeal of the exhibit. And the judges are focused on whether the presentation is free of distractions. And some common distractions, particularly in postal history, is we see the repetitive layout. We've all seen the railroad track exhibits where there's two covers on every page. The covers are in exactly the same spot in every page, and it goes on for 10 frames. That's it's not a very visually appealing thing to look at. Find ways to avoid the railroad tracks, change up the layout, make it a little more visually interesting. Sometimes we see items mounted haphazardly. Obviously, that could ding your presentation a bit. More commonly, people try to cram too much stuff into a page. It's too busy or it's too crowded. You don't have too much white space, but give your text, give your covers a little room to breathe. Occasionally, presentation we see folks who ran out of paper stock as they were remounting part of their exhibit, as if some of the pages are one color and some of the pages are another. Avoid that if you can. And the last common presentation thing to be conscious of is the font size and colors, right? Make sure that the font is legible, particularly in a poorly lit exhibition hall, which are all too common. And be thoughtful about colors, right? Certain colors can be difficult to read. They can be garish. They can be hard to read under particular lighting conditions. Pick something that's going to be easy for the judges and for your audience to digest. I think there'll be questions later on, but John, that's what I have about those three categories.
Okay. I missed the introduction to all of this, but let me just go ahead and talk a little bit about judging with points. I'm still showing you, Andrew, as the picture on my little phone. I'm not sure that my video is working, but it is what it is. Anyway, American judges began using points to evaluate exhibits at national shows about 10 years ago as part of a package of changes that affected exhibit evaluation. It was a controversial decision by the APS to do this, and many judges resigned or retired because of the extra work required in preparation, time at the frames, and additional feedback methods after judging. But in general, exhibitors liked the change, especially the providing of points by evaluation category, because it gave them a quantifiable measure of where their exhibit could be improved. Points are given in 6 categories: 10 for importance, split between the subject chosen, that is to say, how important it is in philately generally, and 5 points for how important the exhibit is, measuring it against how it measures up to being the best it can be in covering the subject. There are 20 points for treatment, which means how well the material presented conforms to and covers the subject described in the title page and the title itself. Also, part of this category is how the exhibit uses chapters, chapter introductions, and page titles to help the viewer follow the exhibit's story. 35 points are given for accuracy of philatelic knowledge and personal study that results in new material discovered and/or new information about the subject being developed. 20 points are available for rarity. This is not the same as old and expensive. In this context, it means difficulty of acquisition. There may be an overlap with value, but there are a lot of valuable stamps that are easily available if you can write a big enough check. 10 points are given for condition, which is defined as the best condition that's available for the material being shown. No one expects a crash cover to be pristine. Finally, presentation is given 5 points. Is the exhibit visually pleasing and free from distractions that take away focus from the philatelic material? The points awarded are provided to the exhibitors on an exhibit evaluation form, and that's completed by the judge who's the designated first responder. He or she records the jury's observations and suggestions to help the exhibitor to improve the exhibit before its next showing. The total number of points determine the medal level. If the exhibit gets 90 to 100 points, it's a large gold. 85 to 90, a gold. 80 to 84, a large vermeil. 75 to 79, a vermeil. 70 to 74, large silver. 65, 69, silver. 60 to 64, silver bronze. And 55 to 59, bronze. This is not the only feedback available to exhibitors. The EEF has the name and email of the first responder, who's generally happy to meet with exhibitors or their representative at the frames to provide more specific comments and answer questions. Now, if Ken Martin is on the
I am.
okay, I will turn this over to him to talk about importance, treatment, and knowledge personal study in more detail.
Thanks, John, and my apologies for being a little bit late. I had something that was not anticipated come up. But yeah, I've been asked to talk a little bit about treatment, importance, knowledge, and personal study. John introduced them, I think. Treatment, um, and treatment may be the area where it might be the easiest to gain points for many people or to lose points. It doesn't, for the most part, necessarily require big expenditures of dollars. You could do hopefully a good treatment just being with it, defining the subject, having a title that matches what you do, and a title that is doable in the number of frames. You're not going to say you're going to cover the entire world in a one-frame exhibit, or I hope you're not going to try to do that. That would not be a suitable topic for one frame, and that would be very difficult to treat. You want to generally, I sort of think of it as a book, have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion or an epilogue. One of the things that I think has the most potential for improvement of exhibits is the epilogue or the conclusion. It shouldn't just stop because you reached, your subject is 1900 to 1950, you reach 1950 and you stop. No, I want to know, okay, what was the impact of what you showed? Was it something that was introduced that was followed through and had an impact on future stamps or postage rates in the future? Or maybe it was a failure. That's fine to say it was a failure too. But hopefully you have some sort of thesis and you reach a point and it's either worked out or it didn't work out. Um, John mentioned, dividing into chapters. Treatment is certainly helped generally by having some sort of plan, which typically we see on a title page or a first or second page. For a postal history exhibit, the plan's probably not going to be as in much depth as thematic exhibits, which had plans before traditional and other types of exhibits. And it doesn't have to be, lots and lots of you don't need a 50-point outline. That's more than somebody's going to remember. If it's a 10-frame exhibit, there's no reason why you can't have a mini plan. In fact, at the start of each chapter, that might be much more easier to follow. Some people will say, look for a golden thread. Um, every page should logically follow from the previous, and the next page should follow. and should be each philatelic item should be telling a story illustrating the point, but don't fall into the trap of, oh, I got this fantastic cover and I already have one exactly like that, so I'm going to put 2 or 3 or 4 in there. That's not adding to the story. It's really hard. Got a great bargain found on the show floor or found at an auction, item you love, but each item should add to your story for good treatment. Um, Scope and limits, development of subject, clarity and ease of understanding, balance and completeness of the coverage of the subject. Um, it it doesn't hurt to have somebody who's not a collector read your story or read your text. They should be able to follow it, hopefully. Remember, hopefully you're the expert on your specific subject area, but this is being done for hopefully the education of many showgoers who know maybe little to nothing about your topics. So I'm not saying dumb it down completely, but it should be understandable without having to do research or a lot of knowledge. Um, and follow through straight. I mean, I often argue that people would be better off if they wrote an outline of their exhibit before they ever start putting items on pages. And then you could match up your material in your collection to where it's most effectively. And you'll probably find that in some areas you have way more material than you need. And in other areas, you're probably going to need to go out and start looking for items to better tell your story. Most people don't do that, I don't think. I think most exhibitors take what they have and they put it into an exhibit. Um, and that's, you want to get um, the most pleasure out of it, the quickest way. That may not be always the most effective way to put it together. I think that's treatment in general. Importance, John mentioned, there's really 2 5-point segments. One is importance in overall and to philately. I mean, the first adhesive postage stamp, that's going to be important. Introduction of perforations or different new methods to separate stamps. That's probably something that's important that's going to be adopted by other countries or that has been adopted by other countries. Something that, you know, isn't carried over to other countries is probably going to be less important or something that doesn't have the same level of impact. And then, how difficult is it to do a good job with the subject you've selected, and how does it compare to other exhibits in the same area? That's sort of the other 5 points for importance. Knowledge and personal study. That's, a number of things. Is the material that you selected proper to support the exhibit's assertions? Is the material that you're showing appropriately described? Do you know what you have? Are you properly describing the rates or understanding the markings on the items? And then is there knowledge beyond what you would just get from a standard catalog, especially knowledge that you may have come up with from looking at lots of similar material yourself. If you've written articles that have been published, that's probably going to our book. That's likely going to help you on their philatelic knowledge because it's going to be seen as you've done some of the work and put this together as opposed to just using knowledge that is more easily available from many sources. And that's sort of the personal study as well. Importance, treatment, knowledge, personal study. I think that's a brief overview. So are we opening it up to questions or?
All right, Marianne or Colin?
I would just say, if nobody's going to say anything, let's let's ask for questions.
Well, this is Mike Wilson. I'm actually channeling Colin this evening. There are a couple, and thank you for all the comments on this. There were a couple of comments that came in through the chat, so I'll read them off to you here. One says, Andrew, can you indicate if only recorded copy would be an appropriate way to indicate scarcity or rarity?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Just make sure there's not one in the next exhibit over. Um, actually, the last show I judged was Ballpex a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was 3 weeks actually. Colin was there, John was there as an exhibitor, and there was at least one exhibit that said only known copy, and the very next exhibit or the one before it had another copy. And when that happens, then you start to question the other claims, unfortunately. So be careful.
Yeah. And also give some color about what that means, right? If you've collected this area for 40 years, or you're the world's foremost expert, or you've published on it, it's more credible that it really is the only copy than if it's a new area for you or what have you. So try to, in your synopsis, give the judges some basis to credit your knowledge.
All right, can I throw in a commercial here? Those of you who are members of the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors, in the last issue, there's a short editorial on what to do and what not to do in claiming rarity. If you're not a member, you should be if you're an exhibitor. And if you simply Google American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors, that will get you to our website.
Can I make one more commercial? If you're a US collector and you want some instant credibility for your knowledge, we're always looking for articles in the specialist. So, shameless plug, but please reach out to me if you have some information like that you'd like to publish. We would be very interested.
Excellent. Another comment, this probably goes to you, Andrew. Comment is a high percentage of advertising covers from the 1850s and 1860s are in poor condition. So I guess the question is that taken into consideration when you look at the quote condition of an item?
Yeah, you want to tell the judges that in your synopsis, and if you're putting covers that are sort of ratty or stained or what have you, and that's unavoidable, let them know why. Uh, I think sometimes we see the catechism people write in their synopsis that, oh, this is the best available stuff, period. Don't do that. Like, give the judges a little more color, a little more information about why they ought to think that's true. Um, as John said, strive for the best condition available, and if the best condition available is not great, tell us. But yeah, I think people understand that you would expect a different standard of quality for a cover that's from the 1850s and one that's from 1950.
Okay. Comment here is regarding matting your covers. It says, don't use a black mat or black outline around your covers. If you do, everything will look like a morning cover. So
That is true. And also, that will have the opposite effect of trying to conceal the flaws.
Yes.
It will magnify them. I strongly recommend not using black mats for stamps or for covers. Use something where the perf tips and maybe the rough edges of the cover are going to kind of just blend into the mat.
okay.
If it's pristine material, modern material that's pristine, then that might not hurt you. But yes,
Fair, fair.
generally speaking, yes, you're going to point out any problems.
Okay. Here's a question. I don't know who wants to tackle this one. It says, what is unique about postal history exhibits? Is it only rates and route?
And markings.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to hear John and Ken's view about this. I think in U.S. philately, we tend to blur the line between postal history and traditional a lot, right? The tradistory exhibit, as some call it, has become a kind of an accepted thing. I think other exhibiting domains, particularly internationally, that's not as true. So yeah, postal history can be rates, routes, and markings, but I think you see a lot of postal history even in a traditional exhibit. Maybe it's postal history oriented towards that stamp issue and not towards some other historical event or a place or what have you. But yeah, I think you see this is not a bright line between a postal history exhibit and a traditional exhibit.
In the US, there's generally been um, we've gone to more similar judging standards for regardless of the type or the class or whatever. At one point in time, there were probably 8 different score sheets, depending whether it's display class or illustrated mail or single frame. Now, for the most part, I mean, yes, there is for thematic versus traditional. The couple of the categories are split the points a little bit differently, but for the most part, we're using the same points and the same categories for everything. And we're also allowing much more flexibility than you have on the international level for what you can show, and that you don't have to toe directly to just one, be traditional or postal history, that you can define it the way you want, but make sure you do the way you define it. Don't tell us one thing and do something different.
Okay, let me throw in a few thoughts here. I think with postal history, uh, the storytelling is really very important. Um, we have gone over the past 15 years or so from showing just wonderful material to using our material to tell a story. In postal history, that's absolutely a key. And it needs to be the full story. Whatever you have set as a goal for yourself, um, it needs to be fully done. Internationally, you're not really allowed to show stamps in national exhibiting here. Uh, some stamps are okay if they show off cover, if they show a relevant cancel, for instance. And another thing with postal history is a lot of emphasis in terms of condition is put on the clarity of the cancel or whatever other marking is being shown. So that's something to pay attention to.
Good points.
And John, this question is probably for you. It says, overall, it seems important scores have gone down since the change in the scoring to, say, 5+5. Any comments on that? It used to be 7 to 8. Now it's common to see 5 out of 6, 5 to 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I do have some comments. When we made the first iteration of the change to points, it was interpreted as being importance in terms of world philately. Only recently, like in the last 2 years, have we changed that to the 5+5 formulation. And what I'm seeing is that that has brought importance scores up a point or two. Because a great many of the exhibits that we see are the result of 20, 30, 40 years worth of effort. And they are really important as exhibits, even if they represent a small slice of the philatelic pie. So I would say for the most part, I'm seeing 7s and 8s as important scores today.
I think the change has impacted different exhibits differently, but I would agree that more, I would think, have gone up maybe a point with the change than have gone down. But exhibits that may have been seen as traditionally important, only using the one criteria, may not be doing quite as well.
And this is a follow-up on, this is from another individual, but asks, could you clarify how importance is defined? I often hear that only a handful of countries are considered important, typically those with highly developed postal systems, while others, which invested significant effort to build a functioning system under difficult conditions, are viewed as less important. How is importance normalized across exhibits that represent such different postal contexts?
Well, I guess I would go back to the Manual of Philatelic Judging and Exhibiting, which you can download from the APS website free of charge. I think I actually happen to have that page in front of me, page 9. It says the criteria of importance split into two 5-point sections requires first, an evaluation of the importance of the exhibit subject as a slice of the philatelic pie, its importance in terms of stamps needed by a postal system serving a country's population, and/or the magnitude and significance of the subject compared to other similar subjects. And 2, the challenge represented by the exhibit subject and the degree to which the exhibit thoroughly meets that challenge compared to other exhibits of the same subject. Now, that's not easily interpreted, maybe, but that's what I think we have to go back to, or that's what it comes down to.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. The location represented by the exhibit, yeah, a large country certainly is going to count for something, but a small country that's at a crossroads of how mail is transported, that also counts. So it's not just big. It also has to do with, for instance, with stamps. A first issue is going to be important. An issue that was used over a long period of time is going to be important. That sort of consideration. So it is more intricate than just because it's a big country.
Here's another question on importance, very popular topic. Is importance included in the scoring of thematic exhibits? The importance of the thematic subject is highly subjective and shouldn't be judged the same as philatelic importance.
Importance is included in thematic exhibits. It's thematic importance, I would say, not the philatelic importance, but thematic importance. There are points, and like I say, we've gone to pretty much similar point systems, score sheets for a wide class of exhibits, and importance is part of the thematic exhibit evaluation.
So that's all of the comments that came in through the chat. So I think if folks have other comments, just unmute yourself and fire away. I think we've got Lee has a question.
Yes, thank you. I'm in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, and great discussion tonight. I have a shipwreck collection, and of course, condition. I don't have access to put it online, but condition is a relative statement. That's a cover from the shipwreck, and you can see it's nibbed at both the top corners and pretty grubby looking. Most of them have no stamps on them. This is a postcard from Newfoundland, which has been chewed up and has some backing that has been remanufactured, but it's an original postcard and so on. So condition is a very relative subject, and you covered that well, I thought. My question is, I have a census of all of the covers from this particular wreck in 1899, and I would mention that in my synopsis as opposed to in the exhibit.
I think you.
So that.
Oh, sorry.
So
Go ahead,
that
Leah. Go ahead.
So that the judges would understand the rarity of the particular items that have been collected. It's taken me 40 years to collect 33 items. And I know where there's another 7 to 9, roughly. So there's really only some 40, 41 maybe related covers to this collection. And back in 2000, they thought there were 15 of them. And I had been collecting and already had 17 or 18 by that time. But anyway, it's the world's best collection of this particular wreck. There's no question of that. But I just want to make sure that I don't overdo it on the exhibit page. But I want to understand that each and every item is shown is somewhat unique in its own, and there's very few of them around. Anyway, so that's the first thing.
Yeah, I would do that. I'd actually hammer that in a couple of places, right? That's such a significant fact for sure. Put it in your synopsis, explain your census. If it's a brief enough census that you can attach it to the synopsis, I
It's
might even
brief,
think
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
And if you know, because you can make a completion statement like the one you just did, or completeness statement, I would have that in the title page. And then if there are, your challenge, I think, is going to be highlighting the items that are particularly unusual, or particularly desirable, or particularly important. Because you're right, you can make a rarity claim for everything in your exhibit. So pick
Yeah,
pick the ones that are special for some,
yeah.
particular reason,
There's
and
one that
maybe call out your senses about those sort of in the item description.
there's
Uh,
only one recorded registered cover.
well, yeah, I
Only
would I would
one
mention that.
one
Yeah.
recorded from the Isle of Saint Pierre Miquelon to England and so on. Anyway, so
Hmm.
there are three or four very unique items. So that I would highlight or use a highlighter or just say something on the exhibit page.
Yes,
Yeah, makes sense.
definitely. Yeah,
Oh,
definitely
sorry,
on the
John.
exhibit page. Um, Again, condition is not an absolute. Um, if you can say that this is one of one known, whatever the condition problems are automatically forgiven, even if it's one of three known. If you can say that this is the best available example, um, that takes care of any condition issues. Um, yeah,
Okay.
Andrew.
I would go ahead, Andrew.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I think I was about to say the same thing. Yeah, you are in a happy circumstance where your census can also help you with condition for exactly the reasons John said. If it's the only
Okay.
registered cover, it doesn't really matter what condition it's in.
Right. Okay. The last item with regards to my particular question and my particular exhibit is the use of ephemera. I have only three items of ship's passage ticket ticket holder type data information about transatlantic the leaving of transatlantic ships. So and one with a logo on it for the shipping company that lost the ship in 1899 and so on. So the use of ephemera is allowed in an exhibit like this, but you don't want to overdo it. I mean, I've got a picture out of the marine information out of Newport News in the States, a picture of the actual ship and so on and so forth. So a few little items to add something colorful and different to looking at covers with soaked off stamps. Like that's not very exciting. You can't add a lot of color when I don't have it. Anyway, it's not available.
And
I
I
think
think,
the
yeah,
important thing with this is that you show original items.
Right.
Uh,
Well, they are
that
original, yeah.
all right, yeah, that's
Other than the photo of the ship, which I recorded the source of on that basis. So, you know,
mhm.
you have a ship and you got a picture of it, you want to show it, not that it's originally taken or I have the original negative or something. All good. Thank you very
the
much for your time.
judges might appreciate this comment. It says, "I just want to thank you for this great presentation and discussion. I hope to be entering my first exhibit soon, and this has been most informative, educational, and helpful as I review my three-panel exhibit laid out on my workbench for a final review. I think I'll make a few tweaks, especially to the conclusion. Thank you for the tips." I do think that's really helpful because I'm a relatively, inexperienced exhibitor, and I think getting more exhibitors into the field, I think, is really critical. So I think the more education, the better.
Okay. Let me throw in something here on conclusions. It's in the last about 10 years become the fashion to end an exhibit with what's called an epilogue page. The epilogue page is really something that allows you to end the story, but can also be a transition to what came next at the end of the story. I have been dinged for not having an epilogue page. I don't think that's a particularly good thing, but okay, I'll go along with the program. But it does allow a definite end to the exhibit.
So we're approaching the top of the hour. About 5 minutes left, I guess. Certainly, I'm sure the panel of judges would be happy to take additional questions or comments.
I wanted to comment briefly on the person who indicated they're about to start exhibiting for the first time. Like, that's great. And I would say don't be intimidated.
Right.
Right. I know the prospect of entering your treasures and putting them up for public display and judging is daunting. I know it was for me, but none of us are doing this because we like to make people feel bad or discourage them from showing. It's quite the opposite. So lean in. Judges don't bite. We'd love to see more new exhibits.
I think Ken is probably well familiar with this, but on the APS Hub, there was a lot of discussion back and forth around Boston 2026 and the cost of exhibiting, and people complaining that, well, only if you have really pricey material is it worth exhibiting. And the fact of the matter is, I think if you love what you collect and you got a story to tell, put it out there. I mean, people are going to appreciate it. And maybe you get a gold, maybe you get a bronze. If you're not really hung up on getting a large gold in the national award, you'll have a great time doing it. So.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I mean, different people, you can have different reasons to exhibit. Some is just to show off material. Some would rather probably have the most popular award at a show than
Hmm.
maybe a gold or something. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody has to exhibit to get the absolute best award. Um, I mean, one of the things I often tell people when I'm giving them feedback at the frames, exhibitors, is if you agree with me, then probably go ahead and make the change. If you don't, why don't you see if you get the same comments from several other judges? If you get it from a half dozen judges in a row, then you probably have to decide, do you want to keep it the way I want it, or do I want to try to get the higher medal level? But judges aren't going to be all in agreement on everything either.
Yeah, the person who's exhibiting said it's very hard not to be intimidated, but thanks for the encouragement. I'm diving in, not expecting gold, but learning how to tell a story about a great topic.
That's great.
Yeah, most people should not expect to get gold the first time out. And in fact, the U.S. is a little bit different than like most countries in Europe and so forth, where you have to sort of go through a progression of a local, and then you reach a certain level, and it can only be shown at regional, then it can only be shown at national, and you can't basically go backward. We are, some would say, a more democratic, or some would use other words, and basically a national level exhibition is open to people who have never even exhibited before, but um, that could be good or it could be bad. It could be, deflating to somebody who sees the other exhibits and doesn't do as well, but you can go right up against them if you want.
I'd like to comment on the reasons for exhibiting and how that can impact medal level. Um, One of the things I try to do with my exhibits is to educate. I want people to get a better sense of what the material means. And to me, what that means is that I write too much. We didn't talk about how much text is proper for an exhibit, but I think the general feeling is that uh, not as much as people would normally like to write. Um, I know that if I write too much, um, it may cost me a point or two um, in either presentation or treatment, but I'm willing to give that up in order to do what I want to do with the exhibit. And I think there are a lot of people like that. There are people who exhibit what they exhibit with the idea that they're recruiting for their collecting area, or they're putting out their material hoping people will respond with similar material. So there are lots of ways that that people can exhibit, and the weight of the metal is not the most important thing for a lot of exhibitors.
Agree.
Although mug hunting is fun, John.
Very good. If there's no more questions, Marianne, I think I'll toss the call back to you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank our three gentlemen tonight for this very informative and interesting program. I thought there was a great interaction tonight between our viewers and our presenters. And I'm actually looking very much forward to seeing our three judges at Milcopex in September. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thanks all.